Is the bread sitting on your kitchen counter right now actually bread? Not bread the way your grandmother made it. Not bread the way it was baked in every town and village across this country for centuries. What if I told you that some of the most popular loaves stacked on shelves in Tesco, Dunnes and SuperValue across Ireland contain over 25 ingredients, including dough conditioners that have been quietly phased out in several European countries, preservatives that researchers have connected to behavioural problems in children, and enough added sugar that a nutritionist would struggle to justify calling them a savoury food at all. This is the bread Irish families are buying every single week. This is the bread going into school lunchboxes from Cork to Donegal. I have spent weeks going through ingredient panels, reading through food standards documentation, speaking to people in the baking trade, and comparing what Irish supermarkets are selling against what bread is actually supposed to contain. What I found genuinely unsettled me. Real bread needs 4 things: flour, water, salt, and yeast. That is it. The bread-filling Irish supermarket shelves today contains emulsifiers that interfere with gut bacteria, vegetable oils that were never part of any traditional recipe, and shelf life extenders that allow a loaf to sit untouched for 10 days without growing a single spot of mould. Let me walk you through the 10 worst offenders on Irish shelves right now, and by the end of this, you will never look at the bread aisle the same way again. Number 10. Brennan's white pan. Now I want to be careful here because Brennan's holds a genuinely special place in Irish food culture. The yellow and green packaging is as familiar as anything in an Irish kitchen. The slogan, "Today's bread today," has been part of Irish life since the 1960s. My own family bought Brennan's for as long as I can remember, and I suspect yours did too. That familiarity is exactly the problem, because it stops people from ever questioning what is actually inside that bag. When you have grown up with something on the kitchen table, you stop seeing it critically. You trust it by reflex. And brands know that. That trust is something they rely on, and in the case of Brennan's, it is something they are exploiting. When you pull open the ingredient list on Brennan's white pan, the first thing you notice is that after wheat flour and water, the third ingredient is sugar. Real bread does not have sugar as a primary ingredient. Sugar is added to accelerate yeast activity and to produce that mild sweetness that Irish consumers have been conditioned to expect from sliced white pan over decades. The bread also contains vegetable oil, which is not part of any traditional pan loaf recipe anywhere in the world. The oil is there to keep the crumb soft, to extend the shelf life, and to create that pillowy texture that makes the bread feel fresh, even when it is not. Brennan's white pan contains emulsifiers, including mono and diglycerides of fatty acids. Research published in the journal Nature has indicated that emulsifiers of this type can disrupt the intestinal microbiome and promote low-grade inflammation in the gut. When you eat a few slices of this bread every single day, which most Irish people do, you are consuming these compounds with every sandwich, every piece of toast, every bit of bread and butter. The sodium content is also worth noting. 2 slices of Brennan's white pan delivers approximately 380 milligrams of sodium. That is well over 15% of your recommended daily limit from bread alone, before you have added a single thing to it. And yet, because this bread has been part of Irish life for so long, nobody questions it. The packaging has barely changed. The familiarity provides a comfort that the ingredient list does not deserve. Irish families have been loyal to this brand for 2 generations. That loyalty has never been repaid with honesty about what is in the product. Number 9. Brennan's whole grain. I am keeping Brennan's on the list for a second entry because their whole grain range is, if anything, more deceptive than the white pan. The packaging leans heavily into health imagery. There are references to whole grains, fiber, and nutritional goodness. Parents reach for it thinking they are making a responsible choice for their families. But here is the issue. Whole grain bread that still contains added sugar, vegetable oil, vinegar as a mould inhibitor, and multiple emulsifiers is not wholesome food with a few industrial ingredients hidden inside it. That is industrial bread with some whole grain flour used to justify the health marketing. The addition of whole grain flour does provide more fiber than white flour, and that is worth acknowledging. But fiber content does not neutralize the emulsifiers, the added sugars, or the processed oils that make up the rest of the formula. People who switch from Brennan's white to Brennan's whole grain thinking they are making a major health upgrade are largely switching from one industrially produced product to a slightly different version of the same thing. The ingredient list for the whole grain range still runs to well over a dozen items. Traditional wholemeal bread in Ireland contained 4 ingredients. If the brand your grandparents trusted needs 15 ingredients to produce a loaf of bread today, something has changed, and it was not changed for your benefit. Number 8. Kingsmill 50/50. Kingsmill is a British brand that has achieved significant shelf presence in Irish supermarkets, particularly in Tesco and SuperValue. The 50/50 range is marketed as a compromise between white and wholemeal, giving your family the best of both. The packaging emphasizes that it contains wheat germ and looks to position itself as the sensible middle ground for health-conscious families who do not want to go fully wholemeal. But let us look at what is actually in it. After wheat flour, the ingredient list includes wheat protein, which is isolated gluten added to improve the structure and texture of the loaf. It includes sugar. It includes rapeseed oil. It includes emulsifiers. It includes calcium propionate, which is listed on the packaging as preservative E282. Calcium propionate is an antifungal compound that prevents mould growth and extends shelf life significantly. Research published in the Journal of Pediatrics and Child Health has linked calcium propionate consumption to restlessness, sleep disruption, and irritability in children. A study involving children with attention difficulties found measurable improvement in behavior when calcium propionate was eliminated from their diets. For bread positioned as a family product, the kind that goes into children's lunchboxes 5 days a week, the inclusion of a preservative with this research profile is something every parent deserves to know about. Kingsmill 50/50 has a shelf life of around 8 to 10 days, real whole grain bread. With honest ingredients and no artificial preservatives, goes stale or grows mold within 2 days. The length of that shelf life tells you exactly what is in there keeping it fresh, and it is not anything that belongs in a traditional bread recipe. Number 7. Little Favourites White Sliced. Budget supermarket bread in Ireland occupies a strange space. It is everywhere, it is cheap, and the packaging is deliberately plain and inoffensive, which somehow makes people trust it more. Little Favourites. White Sliced is one of the most widely purchased budget breads in the country, and the price point of around €1 for an 800-gram loaf is genuinely appealing to families watching their spending. But the price tells you something important about what has been compromised to reach it. Producing a loaf of bread with quality ingredients and honest processing costs money. When you are selling bread at €1 a loaf, something has to give, and what gives is always ingredient quality. Little Favourites. White contains wheat flour, water, and then an almost immediate drop into sugar, rapeseed oil, and a full complement of emulsifiers and preservatives. The soy flour content in this bread is notable. Soy flour is a cheap protein extender that allows manufacturers to reduce the amount of actual wheat flour in the recipe while maintaining the protein figure on the nutrition panel. You are eating less wheat and more industrial soy filler than the label implies. The emulsifier content is substantial, including mono and diglycerides and soy lecithin, both of which have been associated in peer-reviewed research with gut microbiome disruption. For €1 a loaf, you might feel like you are saving money, but if bread is something your family eats every single day, the ingredients in what you are buying matter enormously. Budget does not have to mean harmful, but in this case, it largely does. Number 6. Irish Pride. The name alone deserves attention. Irish Pride. It is not subtle. When a bread company calls its product Irish Pride, it is making a direct appeal to national identity, to the idea that buying this loaf is somehow an act of loyalty to the country, to Irish farmers, to Irish baking tradition. People pick it up in Dunnes and SuperValue without a second thought because the name feels like a reassurance. You are buying something Irish, something to be proud of. And then you read what is actually in it. Irish Pride White Sliced Pan contains wheat flour, water, and then sugar as the third ingredient, then rapeseed oil, then a list of emulsifiers, stabilizers, and preservatives that stretches to 14 items in total. For bread that wraps itself in national identity, the formulation is indistinguishable from any other industrial loaf on the shelf. The emulsifiers include mono and diglycerides of fatty acids, the same compounds that research has linked to intestinal, microbiome disruption, and gut inflammation. The calcium propionate, E282, is present as well, the same preservative that has been associated in peer-reviewed studies with irritability, restlessness, and sleep disturbance in children. Irish Pride is produced by IAWS Group Interests and distributed nationally. It is not a small artisan operation carrying a big name. It is a commercially scaled industrial baking operation using the name of the country as a marketing device. What irritates me most about Irish Pride is the cynicism of the branding. Nobody named their bread Austrian Pride or Danish Pride without having something to answer for in the ingredient list. When a brand leans that hard on national identity, it is usually because the product itself cannot carry the weight of scrutiny. Irish Pride is a prime example of exactly that. The name is doing work that the bread cannot do on its own. If Irish baking heritage actually meant something to this company, the ingredient list would reflect it. 4 items, not 14. Number 5, Hovus Seed Sensations. Hovus is a brand with enormous heritage in Britain and meaningful shelf presence in Ireland. Seed Sensations is one of their flagship health-positioned ranges, and the marketing is sophisticated. The packaging talks about natural seeds, wholesome grains, and the kind of nourishment you want to provide your family. It positions the bread as the thoughtful choice, the one you reach for when you are trying to do right by the people you are feeding. There are sunflower seeds, linseeds, and pumpkin seeds visible in the slices. The colors on the packaging are earthy and natural. Everything about the visual language says this is a step above. The problem is that Seed Sensations contains rapeseed oil, sugar, and a preservative and emulsifier profile that is broadly identical to Hovus standard white bread, just with seeds added into the mix. The addition of seeds is real, and seeds do provide omega-3 fatty acids and fiber. Linseeds in particular have legitimate nutritional value, but a seed scattered through industrial dough does not make the bread healthy any more than a grape thrown into a fizzy drink makes it a health food. The underlying formula is still processed, still reliant on emulsifiers to create shelf stability, and still dependent on preservative E282 to prevent mould for an unnaturally long period. If you buy Seed Sensations and leave a slice on the counter, it will stay mold-free for a week. That does not happen with bread made from real ingredients and nothing else. The mold resistance is chemical, and you are eating those chemicals with every slice. Irish consumers are paying a meaningful premium for Seed Sensations over standard sliced white. That premium is justified entirely through marketing imagery and seed content. The industrial base that the seeds are embedded in is no different from cheaper products on the same shelf. When you pay extra for Hovus Seed Sensations, thinking you are investing in your family's health, you are primarily investing in Hovus's marketing budget. Number 4. SuperValue Own Brand Sliced Pan. Own brand products from major supermarkets occupy a peculiar position in the Irish grocery landscape. People tend to either trust them implicitly because they are from a familiar store or dismiss them as obviously inferior. The reality is more nuanced and more troubling than either response. SuperValue Own Brand Sliced Pan is produced under contract by one of the major commercial bread manufacturers supplying the Irish market. The SuperValue label goes on the bag, but the bread inside is made by the same industrial process, in the same kind of facility, using the same class of ingredients as the branded products sitting beside it. The ingredient list for SuperValue Own Brand white sliced runs to 16 items. That is 4 times what real bread requires. You have wheat flour and water, and then you have sugar, rapeseed oil, soy flour, wheat protein, emulsifiers, preservatives, and iodized salt. The iodized salt is worth pausing on. Iodine is added to salt in commercial bread because refined white flour has been stripped of the iodine that naturally occurs in whole wheat. So they take out the iodine during processing and then add it back in a synthetic form and present this as nutritional benefit. That is not fortification in any meaningful sense. That is damage control, dressed up as responsible manufacturing. Consumer feedback on Irish food forums consistently describes SuperValue own brand bread as fine but unremarkable, and that is accurate. It is not the worst bread on this list, but fine and unremarkable is not what bread should be when the alternative is buying something with 4 ingredients that actually taste like bread and supports your health rather than working against it. Number 3. Johnston, Mooney and O'Brien. This one is the hardest entry on this list to write because Johnston, Mooney and O'Brien is not just a brand, it is a piece of Dublin history. Founded in 1835, it is one of the oldest commercial bakeries in Ireland. The name is woven into the fabric of the city. Generations of Dublin families grew up with this bread on the table. There are people in their 70s and 80s who remember the Johnston, Mooney and O'Brien delivery vans doing their rounds through the north side and south side every morning. It feels like an institution. It is supposed to feel like an institution. And that is precisely how the brand survives, despite producing bread that the founders would not recognise as their own. Johnston, Mooney and O'Brien was absorbed into Allied Bakeries, which is owned by Associated British Foods, a British multinational with annual revenues exceeding €18 billion. Think about that. One of Dublin's oldest and most recognisable bread names is owned by a British conglomerate headquartered in London. The Irish heritage is kept alive on the packaging. The profits flow out of the country entirely. The ingredient list for Johnston, Mooney and O'Brien white pan bread reads like every other industrial loaf on this list. Wheat flour, water, sugar in third position, rapeseed oil, soy flour used as a cheap protein extender to bulk out the wheat, wheat protein isolate added back to compensate for the structural deficit caused by the soy flour, emulsifiers and calcium propionate as the primary preservative. The texture is that characteristic over-soft industrial crumb that compresses to almost nothing when you press it. Real Dublin bread from this bakery in the 1950s had structure and character. It went stale in 2 days because it was baked from actual ingredients and nothing else. The Johnston, Mooney and O'Brien you buy in Tesco today survives on a shelf for 8 to 10 days because it is held together by chemistry, not craft. What makes this entry so difficult is the emotional weight of the name. People buy this bread because it feels like buying Dublin itself. They feel a connection to something old and genuine and local. But the connection is an illusion maintained by a foreign corporation that acquired the name and kept it precisely because that emotional resonance drives sales. The bread inside the packaging has nothing to do with the bakery that stood on Ballsbridge in 1835. It is industrial food in a nostalgic wrapper, and Irish consumers deserve to know the difference. Number 2. Tesco Finest Malted Bloomer. The Tesco Finest range is built on a specific promise. When you reach for a Finest product, you are supposed to be getting something genuinely superior, something that justifies a noticeably higher price point through better sourcing, better ingredients, and better production standards. Irish shoppers have broadly accepted that promise and extended it to everything in the Finest. Line from chicken to cheese to bread. The Malted Bloomer sits near the top of Tesco's in-store bread hierarchy. It looks exceptional, the shape is impressive, the crust has visible character, and the malted wheat flavour is legitimate and pleasant. It is genuinely nicer to eat than a standard sliced pan, and I want to acknowledge that. The sensory experience is better, but sensory experience and ingredient integrity are not the same thing. But the ingredient list on the Tesco Finest Malted Bloomer contains rapeseed oil, malted barley flour, emulsifiers including mono and diglycerides of fatty acids, and vinegar as a preservative. For a product in the Finest range charging a premium over standard bread, the presence of industrial emulsifiers and vinegar as a mould inhibitor is hard to reconcile with the premium positioning. Real artisan malted loaves, made with honest ingredients and proper fermentation time, do not need emulsifiers to hold their structure. They do not need vinegar to prevent mould. They develop their character through the baking process, and they go stale within a couple of days because they are made from real food. The Tesco Finest Malted Bloomer lasts considerably longer than that. The extended shelf life is achieved through the same industrial additives present in cheaper loaves. You are paying Finest prices for a Finest label applied to a product that does not deliver on the core promise of the range. If you are spending €3 or €4 on a loaf of bread in Tesco, expecting something genuinely superior to an everyday sliced pan, check the ingredient list before you make that assumption again. This is not it. Number 1. Pat the Baker Sliced Pan. This is the one that will upset people the most, and I understand why. Pat the Baker is not just a brand in Ireland, it is an institution. The name, the character on the packaging, the decades of advertising and familiarity, it all adds up to a brand that feels like part of the fabric of Irish daily life, particularly in Connaught and Ulster, where Pat the Baker has the deepest market penetration. People feel genuine affection for this brand. Parents buy it because their parents bought it. Children request it by name. Regional loyalty to Pat the Baker runs deep in a way that is not really about bread at all. It is about identity and place and the comfort of the familiar. When a brand carries that kind of emotional weight, it earns a level of trust that it has to work very hard not to abuse. Pat the Baker sliced pan abuses it. The ingredient list for Pat the Baker standard sliced white runs to 17 items. 17, after wheat flour and water. You have sugar as the third ingredient, then rapeseed oil, then soy flour, a cheap protein extender that reduces the amount of actual wheat flour needed in the recipe. Then wheat protein isolate added back in to compensate for the reduction in natural gluten caused by adding soy flour in the first place. Then emulsifiers, including soy lecithin and mono and diglycerides of fatty acids. Then calcium propionate, E282, which has been linked in published research to sleep problems, irritability, and behavioural disturbances in children. And then a collection of further additives to round out a list that bears essentially no resemblance to any traditional Irish bread recipe at any point in this country's history. The sugar content in Pat the Baker white pan is approximately 3.2 grams per 2 slices. That is nearly a teaspoon of sugar in what is presented as a basic savoury staple. Irish people eat this bread for breakfast, for lunch, and sometimes with their evening meal. When you are consuming that much added sugar just from your bread, before you have put a single thing on it, you are getting a meaningful dose of sugar multiple times a day from a food most people do not even think of as sweet. And when that sugar lands alongside the emulsifiers and the processed rapeseed oil, all 3 times a day, every single day, the cumulative effect on gut health and metabolic function is not something to dismiss. Bread is not an occasional food for most Irish households. It is a daily staple. That makes what is inside it matter more, not less. What makes this particularly difficult to accept is how transparently the brand relies on Irish identity and emotional familiarity to sell a product that would not survive scrutiny if people actually read the label. The character on the packaging, the name, the regional loyalty, these are powerful levers. And they are being used to sell Irish families a product with 17 ingredients when real bread needs 4. The Pat the Baker. You trust is not producing what the trust implies. That gap between the trust and the reality is something every person buying this brand every week deserves to understand. So what should you actually be buying? The answer is simpler than the bread industry wants you to think. Find your nearest independent artisan bakery and buy from them instead. Ireland has a genuinely thriving artisan baking scene that has grown substantially over the past decade. Seal Bakery in Dublin, The Bread Box in Galway, Griffin's Bakery in Galway City, Tartine in Dingle, The Village Bakery in Donegal. These are operations run by people who care about flour and fermentation and the actual craft of making bread. Their sourdoughs and whole grain loaves contain flour, water, salt, and in some cases a small amount of natural starter culture. Nothing else. If you cannot get to an artisan bakery regularly, look for supermarket breads with the shortest possible ingredient lists. Some Lidl and Aldi organic lines. Do better than their mainstream ranges. Genuine sourdough, the real thing with no added vinegar or emulsifiers, is another solid option. Real sourdough ferments for 12 to 48 hours, and the lactic acid produced during that process acts as a natural preservative, meaning no E282 required. You can identify real sourdough by the fact that it stales within 2 days. If your sourdough is still perfectly soft after 5 days, it is not real sourdough. It has been engineered to behave like sourdough while carrying the same industrial additives as a standard sliced pan. Here is how to read a bread label properly. Count the ingredients first. If the list exceeds 6 items, something has been added that does not belong in bread. Check for E282 or calcium propionate and consider what the research says about giving that to your children every day. Look for rapeseed or vegetable oil and ask yourself why a bread recipe needs industrial seed oil in it. Check where the sugar appears. If it is in the first 4 ingredients, there is a meaningful amount of it. Iodized salt is a signal that refined white flour was used and iodine had to be added back in artificially. Multiple emulsifiers indicate heavy industrial processing designed around shelf life rather than nutrition or flavor. Here is the reality of what has happened to Irish bread. The bread industry in Ireland has been consolidated and in several cases sold to multinational and foreign private equity interests over the past 2 decades. The brands remain Irish in name, in packaging and in marketing, but the formulas have been engineered for maximum shelf life, minimum ingredient cost and consistent industrial output. Natural fermentation takes time and cannot be scaled cheaply, so it was replaced with chemical dough conditioners. Fresh ingredients deteriorate quickly, so they were replaced with preserved and stabilized alternatives. Real cream, real butter, real whole grain flour. These are expensive, so they were replaced with rapeseed oil, soy flour, and synthetic vitamin fortification designed to make refined white flour look nutritious on a label. The bread your grandparents bought from the local bakery in the 1950s and 1960s had 4 ingredients and was gone in 2 days because it was made from real food. The bread filling Irish supermarket shelves today has 17 ingredients and survives for 10 days because it has been engineered to do so. Those extra 13 ingredients are not there for your health. They are not there for flavor. They are not there because bakers discovered a better way to make bread. They are there for shelf stability and profit margin, and the people making those decisions are not sitting around a kitchen table in Ireland. They are in corporate offices making calculations about cost and return. You and your family deserve to know that. Next time you are standing in the bread aisle in Tesco or Dunnes or SuperValue, pick up the loaf you normally buy and count the ingredients. Count them. If you get past 8, put it back. If this video helped you see what is actually in the bread you buy every week, share it with someone who needs to know. And subscribe to the channel because there is a lot more of this kind of investigation coming.